Just contact here.
So you will.
I'll be glad to.
Committee order.
Absolutely. Good afternoon.
Here.
Mr. Brennan.
Present.
Mayor Rickaman.
Aye.
Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. I hope y'all let me take a bite to eat. I'm sorry, but I'm about to get a headache, so I'm gonna do that once we get started. We have committee discussion today for federal, local, and state government. And thank you for all of our wonderful external partners that help us with these items. To start with the federal intergovernmental update, Ms. Deborah Dehaney Howard with Capital Edge. She will go through our fiscal year 2024-2025 earmarks update, as well as the legislative and agency updates. Hi, Deborah.
Hey, Deborah.
Hi.
Hello, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well.
Hi, we hope you are too.
Yes, I am, and Ralph wanted me to convey that he was sorry that he wasn't able to be with us today. He's out of town.
Is he on mile 55 yet?
So he says hello. So anyway, it's good to see everyone, and I will begin the presentation. I'll go through it as quickly, but please stop me if you have any questions as I go through the slides. And with that, we will go ahead and get started. So the first slide, I don't know if it's up.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so the first slide we'll start with is the community-directed projects, better known as earmarks. And in FY 2024, Senator Graham secured $10 million in the 24th SPUD appropriations bill, and he for the Assembly Street project. He also included $3.5 million in the pending 25 SPUD appropriations bill. Regarding the $10 million, I know staff is working to submit the required paperwork for funding for that project. And then for the FY 2025 earmark, we won't know the outcome of that until Congress completes its work on those bills, and we expect that to happen after the November elections. Next slide. Senator Graham also secured in the FY 2024 appropriations bill $575,000 for the Riverview Terrace Water Main Replacement Project. And again, staff is working to submit the required paperwork for that funding. I would say here that during the August recess for Congress, if you see Senator Graham or his staff, please thank them for their work on not not only securing funding for those projects, but also including them in pending appropriations bills. In terms of recent federal grants, this slide just shows that in fiscal year 23 and 24, the city received $80,000 for Safe Streets and Roads for All planning grant, $290,000 for urban and community forest grant, and $8.7 million for the IRA climate pollution reduction grants. And those two, the last two that I mentioned, those were competitive, very competitive grants and programs. The 290,000 grant, that particular one, there were 4 awards in South Carolina. Columbia happened to be one of them. And then the $8.7 million grant, that is going to the COG. So it is going to the Midlands Council of Governments, but the city will and should work with them to receive some fundings for this particular area. And then finally, $5 million for the airport. Next slide. In the next 2 slides that we wanted to just show that through the work of the mayor, the council members, staff, coming to Washington, D.C. and meeting with the delegation, as Ralph always says, you all are your best lobbyists. We just set you up, and that your discussions with the delegation is a result in terms of the FEMA area. We $32.6 million for RIP grant, $9 million for backup generators, and $35.7 for the Columbia Canal. And again, through hard work from staff, mayor coming into DC along with city council members, we were able to see some progress in that particular area. Next slide. And then the HUD Continuum of Care, earlier this year, the mayor, council members, staff, we came in, we met with HUD, and actually, when we met with HUD, I think going into that meeting, we thought that we would get a lot of pushback for what we were asking for. And in our meeting with the Assistant Secretary for Intergovernmental Affairs, it was quite the opposite. She was supportive. I know that there's been follow-up meetings, and then Mr. Mayor, you had a follow-up meeting with HUD at the U.S. Conference of Mayors meeting in June. So we'll continue to pursue the change in that particular project. But this really illustrates how coming to DC, meeting with the appropriate agencies really can help move the ball forward. Next slide. This is intercity passenger rail. Amtrak is looking to work with the city to lay the groundwork for an application for a corridor identification and development grant. Mayor Bickerman, you met with some Amtrak officials during the U.S. Conference Mayors meeting in June, and we are working with Amtrak to follow up on a meeting for follow up with Amtrak on the next steps to go forward. And of course, the goal here is to extend improved services to South Carolina as Amtrak begins to work on that corridor between Washington and Raleigh. So we'll continue working on that. Next slide, please. Over the years, Ralph has talked about how ambitious this current administration's regulatory agenda is, and this slide just shows some of the final rules that were issued over the past 6 to 8 months. I'll just read them very quickly. PFAS, drinking water standard, and hazardous substance, overtime pay, ADA, the Clean Air Act standards, Build America, Buy America, and Waters of the United States. So these are rules that have been passed. The pending rules, and there's many, but we pulled out several. You can go to the next slide. And those pending rules are the Financial Data Transparency Act, the OSHA, and home simplification, which the home is looking at home investment partnership programs, expanding access to community housing, clarifying home ownership requirements. We will keep you updated as to when those rules, those pending rules are finalized. Next slide. And so for the 118th Congress, they are probably going to finish the FY budget after the November elections. When they return from their August recess, there are about 8 working weeks. So they will return on the 9th of September. They'll have 3 weeks in September to complete their work. Go out in October and the first week of November for the elections and return for about 3 to 4 more weeks of work. So in that time, they will need to pass a budget and we won't know the final numbers of that until after we know the outcome of the elections. But what you have, I believe you have in front of you or emailed our funding chart, where you'll see those appropriation bills that have passed in both the House and Senate, what the numbers are as they currently stand. So we'll keep you posted on that. Next slide. In that 8-week process, here's their to-do list is, again, passing that budget, defense authorization, and the Water Resources Development Act. Local priorities that we will be watching, I'm not sure if they're gonna pass, will be the Rail Safety Act, which will be, may pass, the outdoor recreation, that's your parks, may pass, the affordable connectivity, maybe, and then the liability exemption for local governments under PFAS. Difficult probably won't, but the other 3, maybe. Next slide. And then as we look forward to the 119th Congress, the agenda, of course, will depend on the November elections, but some of the key things that we'll be watching out for will be the clean energy tax incentives. Of course, depending on the outcome, there will either be efforts to repeal them or efforts to maintain them. The 2017 tax law, there are provisions within that law that will expire. And so we'll look to either extend or expand or change that. And then it's reauthorization of the transportation law. Next slide. And so for the, under the reauthorization of transportation law, one of the key things that we're gonna look to do is increase the localization of funding. That's funding that's going to your NPOs. For South Carolina, I believe the NPO gets about 14 million. And then in addition to that, they get about 2 million for bike paths and pedestrian projects. So we'll be looking out and making sure that the efforts on behalf of getting those increased localization of funding are underway, both working with the National League of Cities and the U.S. Conference of Mayors on those particular programs. We'll also look at maintaining the Safe Streets and Road for All grant program, and then maintaining transit funding. Next slide. I mentioned that the provisions of the 2017 tax law will expire. The key priorities there for us will be to maintain the tax exemption for the municipal bonds, reinstate advance refunding for municipal bonds, the state and local tax deduction, trying to restore that, and then the low income housing tax credits. And I will say here, as I mentioned the other day, a lot of staff on that handle tax issues on the Hill have changed. So we anticipate needing to do a lot of education as we go into the 119th Congress. So when the mayor's back for the U.S. Conference of Mayors meeting in January and National League of Cities meetings, we will have those key priorities under the tax law as a part of our briefing packet, just to make sure we're educating the staff on these issues. Next slide. Oh, I think that's the last slide.
Thank you, Deborah.
Yeah, and let me just mention one other thing, and that is it's the FY26 earmarks. It's, we always say it's never too early to start thinking about those, and one that comes to mind is the Emergency Operations Center. I know that we've had some discussions, and Ralph and I are ready to work with the team to start to put together what that package would look like. And when we meet with, Senator Brand and Representative Clyburn, we can begin to lay the groundwork to say that this is a project that we may consider submitting for FY26 earmark. So I'll end there and open it up for questions.
Deborah, as we move forward, one of the things I know we talked about tech, but looking at other opportunities for housing, funding for housing, and obviously here in this community, there's also funding needs for renovation, weatherization, senior assistance. Looking at how that flows. And then I think the second piece to that would be that, obviously homelessness is something we're dealing with, and we're gonna be looking to maybe try to get an earmark as well as we continue to try to work on this situation that's not getting any better in our community.
Okay, great, okay.
Ms. Wilson and Deborah, we had a fruitful trip to DC, had some good opening conversations. The follow-up, I don't think we really knew how to follow up. What the action items, in my opinion, and the mayor and Dr. Bustles can chime in, was to get more of a seat at the table under the continuum of care umbrella. And so I wanted to know, and this is an open question to everybody that went, what more do we need to do to follow up from that HUD meeting where the deputy director, gave us some good intentional remarks that they were going to do something? How can we follow up on that?
And Deborah, I would add to Mr. Brennan's point, I know timing is everything, and so I know Ralph and I had some brief discussions about how do we open that door to the discussion locally. I think the way we left it, what Mr. Brennan is saying is the agency suggested that they needed to help us open that door, do a little groundwork for us to say, and what I really took away from it, you're right, we didn't get a no, that what we were saying is not possible. It's possible, but there's probably some work that needs to be done, and how do you, massage the situation in a way to make people feel comfortable enough to open up the discussion, but also to say that what you're doing is not necessarily wrong. It's helpful in the way you've been doing it, but Columbia is suggesting that it's past time to do things differently, no longer the status quo. Not to say that everyone and the partners don't need to be at the table, but we cannot continue to do things the same. It's like leveling up.
Well, and you're exactly right, Ms. Wilson. We do it in economic development. We do it in transportation. It's a regional approach where local governments, participating community providers and service groups all put into this master plan. And it's just not happening here. And I guess the exact request was, HUD, can you be the parent that brings everybody together?
Right.
And so I don't know, I think we need to follow up on that conversation. I don't know if you, from your trip to the mayor's conference.
They followed up with us, but it was at the same point as where we left it. I mean, they made some introductions with staff here, but it was never about looking at the 13 counties, never looking at the funding and all of that. It's kind of, that was status quo. And so the question becomes, they were saying, well, what y'all are saying is correct. You should be at the table. You should be. I know Kamisha's getting more and more engaged in those conversations, but it's not changing anything. So changing that model of requesting other outcomes. I think the follow-up with the assistant director, I will tell you that out of those conversations came, especially around the federal property like Allen Benedict. So in the next couple of weeks, I know Ms. Bean and her staff want to come meet with our staff and talk about a mixed use, maybe revisiting how that, because HUD's given them some leeway now to work with us at looking how to redevelop it in a little different manner. Also think it had a little bit to do with the fact that they were turned down for state housing tax credits because it's too close to St. Anne's. So looking at how could we get some of the components from the residential, but how do we get some of the use there too that could benefit that whole area from a
Yeah, I mean, is it to the
standpoint. So
point-
they're helping us on some places, push the envelope a little bit. They're very hesitant around changing, and I'd be curious to see if any of that's changed over the last 6 months, but changing the continuum of care. And I think it's because they're worried about unraveling all of them.
Right, so maybe the approach is, not unraveling it, but a new strategic approach. Would a letter to our congressional delegation saying, hey, we would like your support in calling everybody at the table for a homeless strategic planning when it comes to the HUD continuum of care outcomes goals? I mean, I just don't know what's gonna make a dent,
Well, I mean, funding it,
ultimately
we
it's a
stress
problem.
it big time,
Right.
it is a problem. I mean, we're only getting, 3.7 million?
But it's also, I think the service providers, I mean, they see it, but do they see it from our lens, like the big, that's, I think,
And if they don't wanna unravel, then we need to push the delegation to consider a separate allocation to the city. If you don't wanna unravel and have United Way continue to do their, the work with the mock, great, but even the formula is very low and I think that's where we'd like to see
Well, I
a
think
little
the
bit
formula
more.
conversation has to happen, as we've discovered even in Recovery Act, the money that we got was far less than these other communities that were even smaller than us.
Yeah.
And deeper resources. So, yeah, I do think that's a good.
do you think we have the largest homeless population in the state?
Yes.
By a significant amount, wouldn't you think?
We're central. I mean, when you add in the 13 counties that come in for indigent care that people forget about, you think about all the state services are centered here, yeah.
So what
We're the closest place that has the services with the most accessibility with even under an hour transportation.
so it's not a wild idea or an earmark from the federal delegation for something to get, whether it's brick and mortar
Or programmatic.
or programmatic. Maybe we need to pivot and start going that direction. A one-time funding mechanism instead of just a smaller percentage in the continual, just a thought.
I think you all will have, more discussions, I'm sure, about if it is a one-time allocation of some type that we asked for. What do you want to be
Right, we have a plan
directed
to
to?
fund
Right,
the easy
yeah,
bets,
and what,
right.
what is it we're saying we're about to
Gotcha.
do?
That's all I have.
Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you, Mayor, thank you, council members and staff.
Thank you, Deborah. So from there, we are shifting to the local intergovernmental update. Mr. Laddie Howard, the Howard Association, with an update on the penny tax as well as municipal and county updates.
Hello, thank you. As you all know, the penny tax has passed council, and the main question relative to that is whether or not our complete list of projects made it through unscathed, and they have, they're in there. So the county is currently in the PR phase of this, and Chernoff is handling that. So that is underway according to that timeline that they have laid out. And that's as much of an update currently on the penny tax that I can give. I mean, we're not missing anything out of it. And we have our full list of projects there. Are there any particular questions on that?
Well, I think go ahead. I'm sorry.
Just a procedural, so we got a request very, very last minute about some penny tax committee
Okay,
that they were voting on that night and they needed city representatives on. And I mean, it was a scramble to identify folks that we could recommend. Do y'all remember that?
It was the TPAC.
Yeah.
Yeah.
oh, okay.
Was that because that information wasn't available to us, or how did that happen? Because we try to get good folks represented, right? Because our projects are important, and given the history of wanting to collaborate a little bit better with the county, I was just, that was kind of surprising that we were given that information so late.
Yeah, I can't remember if that's one that I sent or not. But I remember sending, did I send it to you? I remember there being one request for representation, and I sent an email out while I was sitting at the meeting.
Okay.
We have members on the team.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember which one that was, because she's asking about last minute.
Yeah, it was like they're voting on it, I'll find it, but yeah, that was one thing where I was like, why are they asking us so last minute?
I'm not,
I think from the penny sales tax, I think my concern, I expressed this to Councilman Brennan earlier, is that having more conversation with leadership over there, making sure that what's being presented in the public, that our citizens understand where we are in that, and that what that looks like over the period of time, because, you know, there was a period where it looked like we were gonna get similar ratio to what, for projects in the city to what the Comet was getting, and, you know, that'd be roughly about 960, million over the 25 years, which is a critical path. For one, it allows us for our 10-year road, so we have our 10-year roads. That's only 28% of the roads. Want to make sure from the infrastructure standpoint, the rest of the road projects, but also having the ability for us to go work with the state and say, hey, we got a chunk of money here, we
matching
need
funds.
y'all match with us, and let's get these roads done. There's a lot of negativity around the penny right now from the constituents, because they're worried that we're not getting those projects. So I think we got to work with them, and I think that's going to be very important to get with the senior staff and really point out what's going to happen within the city limits, because I'm worried that if our constituents don't vote for it, it won't pass. I think it's our only way that we get road money. Our only way we get road money.
and I know that they did, one of the things that they did to try and soften that or deal with that is to really focus on that allocation to each one of the regions to deal with some of those local requests, for the district requests.
Yeah, but that doesn't help us. That's the problem. That's the problem, and that's what people seeing, because all they're hearing is the county's giving up 11 districts, saying like this. So what we want to get into is that conversation. So I think we need to get with Overture and Ms. Mackey, Paul, and a couple other members and really talk through how we message that.
I just wanna know it's not a secret, so is it public now or not? I guess that's all I'm saying. The information has been submitted, they've gone through their committee process, all of that. Because even today at a university meeting, the university was saying, I don't know, I haven't seen that. I need to know if any of our university-related
What's been
projects
put out
are
there
in
has
there.
been so general that it doesn't get into the meat of whatever it is. So it doesn't, everything that's been written, especially in the newspaper, is really county focused. It doesn't talk about the other entities in there. It's either the Comet or the county, and that's where I think people are getting paused, well, whatever. And then, of course, the hangover and the headache from, well, the university got all their projects, nobody else got theirs, and this and that. So I want to be able, for us, is being supportive of having a funding source that we can actually deal with this roads issue, the infrastructure, the sidewalks, all these things that we want to get done for our community, that we have that leverage point. And so I think we got to spend a lot more time focused on that over the next few months, because that's.
I think it was a process question though for me. Do you have any insight on that from before?
What you'll probably end up, my suggestion would be, you ask, whether it's leadership, or at least ask the attorney's office, to what does the referendum question look like? Because it's supposed to be very specific. Now, whether or not any council member may know that, can't answer that, but the lawyers definitely have the list of projects and the allocation amount. So that's a simple request. And you'll be able to see it, and then y'all probably can meet with them and kind of go over that.
And then in the process of them getting from point A to the actual referendum question, I don't know where they are in that part of it. That's, you know, because we met and Dr. Buzzles is probably referencing prior to our council appointees being made, but they were made. And then we came to the table, and Mr. Brennan was very helpful too with that, as far as the city's program of projects that we put together, wanting to make sure that they fell within the prescribed categories, and Clint was really very instrumental in us trying to streamline that so it matched with what they were suggesting needed to be submitted.
Right.
Because we originally hadn't submitted anything, so then when we did, it was in line with what we thought the county was looking for, and the Department of Revenue even blessed the way we submitted the projects. So from that point of submission and an acknowledgement that that was received, I just haven't heard any more about it unless you all have. I think
We just
that's
need to
what
get
we're
some
at.
clarification in the next week, and,
Yeah,
because you're right, I think that the messaging is gonna start up to the public in the next 2 weeks.
mhm,
Because there's only limited participation from the local governments, obviously. So I think you're gonna see the private sector really start to circle the PR marketing wagon here soon.
But it's still gonna be hard for us to sell to our constituents if we can't show
Well,
them.
we need, well,
they do.
we're voters, so we need to be committed
Information.
and confident in it. Because, you know, we put the list together.
Mhm.
Is the list on there? Then, yeah, check the box, we're behind it. So I think
And that's just one portion of it.
right.
The big piece is the other piece is knowing that we have access to, that there's gonna be that designated pot that helps us leverage beyond that, because our roads project's only 132 million. I think.
Well, that's the second resolution question, or the ballot question, is to go ahead and bond out for, I think, $1 billion is what I think it says, to start getting these projects going quickly. So we'll ease into that. But you're right, we just need to get some clarification. But I will say, looking at Greenville's ballot question and now Mecklenburg's, it's still that kind of general umbrella questions of, you know, community or county investment, community, whatever, and transit. Whatever's behind peel that back, I don't think is there yet. So,
I just know that, you know, that's our only resource, so we gotta make it happen.
that's the only way our local roads are getting touched anytime soon.
Well, people will support it, as I think I keep saying this, if you see your street on the list, I think there's gonna be support there for it, it's a long list.
And I think it will help, like, you know, I mean, I've been to 3 meetings at Golden Acres, prime example, you know, and their roads aren't getting paved, every road in that neighborhood, it's a small neighborhood, it's just, but the reality is this type of funding can eliminate us having multiple meetings and show people where they are on the list and there's funding behind it. That takes a lot of pressure off if people know it's coming and there's a source. Right now, I can't show them any.
Yeah, there's some work to be done.
You know, Richland County and Lexington, meet at pretty much the same time or on the same day. So I do split time between those two, primary areas. But I do spend most of my time at Richland County Council meetings. But as far as the relationship with the neighbors, I'm actively there, primarily between those two in West Columbia. And that, as you know from the text messages and stuff that you get, I'm constantly getting things from them or remarks. So I'm trying to work on those and be proactive as far as being there with them and letting them know that there is a active link from the city with them. So I think that is working very well and is progressing, but there's still work to do. And I think as we develop a priorities list between the intergovernmentals, that we'll be more active and them not feeling like some things are popping up, because that was one of the issues that we had with the homelessness issue with McBride and Pew. But we're actively working on those and solving some of those. I think you also had the meeting with Barron, didn't you?
No, she canceled.
She canceled?
She hasn't rescheduled yet.
Sumter, I'm going out as far as Sumter and Camden as well, as you know, so getting more active with the COGs there and with the COG here is something that I'm focusing on and trying to be very active on developing that priorities list, which we don't have between the cities and those. Outside of our, obviously our initiatives with the tax, with the pennies and stuff like that. Seeking direction on that. If there is any more direction, I'll definitely.
Thursday, August 29th, Harvest in Kansas. I'll send you the invite.
I think there's a natural opportunity with some of the scout stuff to do that with Blythewood and some of the counties out there, I guess Fairfield. I'd like to see us think very strategically about how this is not just an investment for Blythewood, but the capital city and what that looks like.
I'm a little bit laid back too, especially after the newspaper incident with the homeless issue. They try to make me the negotiator of something that I don't know about. So I wait for
Just tell them to
direction.
refer everything to me.
Yeah. But, I mean, you're aware of those things. I try to communicate those privately, but
It sounds like to me that part of what we need to discuss as a legislative committee is a little bit about what we want our priorities with our community partners out here. Obviously, you know, Casey and West Columbia and Lexington right now, the river is the biggest discussion, obviously with the connectivity of the pedestrian bridge, the trails, you know, the 27 miles of trails that are getting connected. Blythewood, obviously, for us is economic development, tying in with them, obviously, our water system providing the water that goes to Blythewood, but also the synergy with Scout. You know, Forest Acres is a neighboring city where there's a lot of crossover and think there's a real push. I'm curious to see where they're headed with their donut hole, because it sounds like to me they're getting very aggressive on annexation, so we need to follow that as well, because some of those pockets could affect us. And obviously Camden, I think there may be some changes over there, but they've been coming to a lot more meetings over here and connecting with us.
was there thinking about
From
that
a
bridge?
regional standpoint, they want to be part of a bigger pie, which makes sense. I mean, you look at that, Lexington, Richland, Casey, West Columbia, Forest Acres, Lexington Town, Lexington, Blythewood, and Camden. I mean, you throw Sumter in there, we got a pretty big stick if we can, you know, kind of organize together when it comes to some of the issues that are before us. You know, I think one of the important things is, for me, is that we need to continue to get insight about what's happening, because we're finding out about a lot of things that pass. I do find it a little humorous when I hear from other municipalities, well, you didn't talk to us. I'm like, well, I haven't heard from you in a long time about issues that affect us. And so really good diving through those agendas and understanding as things come up.
What's an example that you've heard recently?
Well, I mean, you know, if somebody says, well, you didn't talk to us about, let's say, you didn't bring us in the fold of a homeless plan, all right, for example. Well, I mean, we haven't heard about the changes at the jail, the taxes, zoo. I mean, I could go through a laundry list.
You're talking more county. I thought you were referring to like municipal to municipal communication.
No, but I mean, most of the other municipalities, you know, the mayors are meeting, we're meeting on a quarterly basis, so we're sharing. The biggest thing we all came together was, you know, with the change at Lexington County when it was coming to roads and some of the infrastructure, because everybody wanted to band together. You know, we have a small piece in there, but some of these communities, I mean, it was gonna be devastating, especially Chapin and town of Lexington, West Columbia, Casey, who we work with pretty closely.
Well, I agree with you. I think the river connectivity are the biggest thing to rally around with our municipal and county. And I think they're having another meeting soon, right? So I think that's a good one for connectivity.
Camden is, Kershaw's concerned with the I-20 project and federal funding for that.
It's a big one. What's next on the, let's say the I-20 is the next on the horizon.
That's the primary thing that I've got, you know, so.
I like
Well, I think
I was just gonna note that in the council's materials, there is the penny list, our proposal that we submitted. So it's in you all's materials. I don't think it has attachment A because that was probably very lengthy with the different roads, but we have that if you all need to see it.
I think we just need to be able to point to people, our constituents, that it's there and there's a reason to support it.
I know I'd like to be more active with the priorities list, definitely.
Do you have anything else?
That's it.
Thank you. And then moving forward with the state intergovernmental update, we have our lobbying team that consists of Mr. Kyle Michelle Law Firm, Mr. Damon Jeter, Jet Court Consulting Group LLC, and Ms. Caroline Delaney, Due South Advocacy LLC. They will all chip in and discuss the fiscal year 24,
The 3
25.
LLCs, how are y'all doing today?
Great, 3 LLCs. 2024, 2025, our earmark results, and of course, the legislative update. Thank you.
Good, thank you. I just want to say at the outset that all three of us appreciate the opportunity to work for the city. We enjoy working for the city, even in those times when it's kind of crazy during session and we get calls at late night. We enjoy doing that. And I think the three of us work well together. And so thank you guys for bringing this team together and letting us take care of the city. Have a great staff here. We work really closely with, of course, Ms. Wilson, Ms. Benjamin, and Ms. Bachnight, and Ms. Lang, and others. So just, we had another good year. There was a lot going on, and it's not over. I mean, there's still things that are going on now in terms of making sure that all the i's are dotted and the t's are crossed to bring the project funding to the city. I will go through these and I'll go through them, take questions however you guys want to do them. These are the budget items that were secured specifically for the city this year. You'll see the last one is not going to go to the city. We'll talk about that when we get to that. The others are all for the city. The neighborhood revitalization and weatherization program that was Senator Devine. She came in to office later in the session, and she was very responsive to the city's needs and wants. And she, after we spoke with her, Mayor, you had many conversations, had that meeting. We were able to secure that money for the neighborhoods. The marketplace at Congaree Point, which is in Senator Jackson's district, of course, you see the 4.4 million for that. That will continue the work that was begun with some funding, some state funding from last year. The 5 Points parking garage, there are actually two different allocations for that. I know you guys are familiar with that. I know Mr. Brennan was very involved in that as well. And these by Senator Harpootlian and Representative Rose were welcome additions to some of the work that we had already done toward the end of the session. These came on to the fore. The quiet zones, we have received funding for quiet zones before from Senator Harpootlian. We have not received funding for the quiet zones in a couple of years, but this year he was able to convince the powers that be that this was his priority, and so we received funding for that. That project is ongoing. I think you guys are up to date on it. Happy to answer any questions. The Fairwold Housing Assistance Program for $500,000 in Representative Hart's district is similar to the work that is in Senator Devine's district. It's similar to the work in the Belvedere and Greenview neighborhood, the hoods that Representative Howard, Chairman Howard represents with $1 million for more investments there. Riverfront Park Trail enhancements, Representative Hart, $350,000. This follows many discussions between you, Mayor, and Representative Hart, and of course, Mr. Simons and his staff, working with Representative Hart on making our riverfront as nice as it can be. The Assembly Street, railroad grade separation. This is the third year that we've received funds for Assembly Street, and glad to hear that Senator Graham is able to do the work that he was able to do on our behalf again this year on that project. Representative Rutherford prioritized the bridge to the Greenway and put $2.5 million toward that project this year. And then Beltline Community Improvements, which is a project we've been working on for many years over in the city-owned space where the baseball field is now behind the Colony Apartments and what we used to refer to as Bethel Bishop, and that park development there for that community. Finally, you'll see the Divine Street Corridor Project, which was, the funding is going to the Department of Transportation. And Representative Rose has led that for some traffic calming measures and some street enhancements on Divine Street. I think that's primarily from 5 Points up to approximately Dreer High School, Divine Street improvements, and I don't know exactly what those are. I know they're working on.
I don't think anybody does yet.
This $24,750,890 was reflective of a lot of work by council, a lot of work by the city staff, and the work that we as a team did in the legislature with the not only the Ways and Means Committee, the Finance Committee, but then all of our delegation to come to the fore for the city of Columbia to help us out this year. Happy to answer any questions or thoughts.
In the future, can you just star or highlight the ones that directly speak to our priorities that we presented to you at the beginning of the legislative year? Because as you know, oftentimes there are things that are funded that may not necessarily be a city priority, even though it's allocated to the city.
Right.
That's three.
Yeah, we got 3.
Do we want to walk through them now?
No, we're good.
Okay, also in the budget, I'll go through these. A lot of what's here is beneficial to cities writ large, and so we included these, the municipal association includes these in their budget, in their budget recap, so we have them here. What is most directly impactful for us, obviously, is the local government fund, which is funded on a formula now, as of about 3 years ago, and it was increased 5% this year, consistent with the formula. And the city of Columbia will receive approximately $3.5 million from the local government fund. The next one, which is the state health insurance plan, regrettably, that one is not, that one does not fund the increase in the employer's cost for state health insurance plan. I checked on that in the last, yesterday or today to confirm, but that is in the budget. That was for some of the local, I guess for state governments. The next one is a program that Chief Holbrook is intimately familiar with, which is the $2.54 million to the Department of Mental Health Alternative Transport Program. This is slowly but surely relieving us of some of the burden of transporting mental health patients, which CPD has done over the years and kind of had an outsized mission in that because of the fact that we're the capital city. $11.5 million to the Election Commission for this fall's elections. This bridge modernization and bridge acceleration really just says the legislature is putting more money towards fixing bridges, and we should see more bridges in and around our city that will be attended to with this extra funding from this year. Then the Office of Resilience and Disaster Relief Reserve Fund was plussed up with $26 million. First responder communication modernization, $1 million to the Department of Administration. Statewide, that's not a lot of money, but hopefully that'll help us a little bit to on first responder communication equipment. And then there's extra money in the Rural Infrastructure Fund and the Statewide Water and Sewer Fund over at RIA this year that we may or may not. I know that Mr. Shealy has already seen the notifications from RIA that they have additional money. And I'm sure we will be taking the steps that we need to take to try to secure a portion of that for the city.
Where are we on the retirement cap?
That's the next on the list. For the last, well, since 2020, which would mean 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023, in those years that they passed that budget, the budget that year. There was a return to work. There was a proviso for returning to work that allowed employees that were returning to work for COVID response jobs to have to waive the provision that you were capped at $10,000. That was not included this year. It was not included in the House budget. It wasn't included in the Senate budget. This is a continuation of Governor McMaster's theme for the last really 9 months, year, which has been COVID's over, we need to move on. COVID's over, we need to move on. It was not proposed in the House or the Senate. Now, the House is more friendly to the return to work exceptions than the Senate is. The House this year proposed an exception for returning to work for critical law enforcement needs and also for fire, people who work as firefighters. And neither of those were included in the Senate budget. So the Senate just would not agree with the House. So what we're left with at the end of the year is there are still the ability to return to work with a 12-month break, after a 12-month break, and it has to be a 12-month break without any compensation, or you can't do 1099 work during that 12-month break for police officers and under the police officer system and the state retirement system for the ones that have been there forever. And I'm trying to recall that right now. It's in front of me. So, but the COVID return to work one was gone, and the critical needs law enforcement one and the critical needs firefighters is not in the budget this year.
Real quick, one of the things we found out in our discussions with lawmakers when we were asking questions why they didn't want to continue with the proviso, they told us that, number one, I'm not saying I agree with it, that it may break the people system.
How?
I'm just telling you what they said, because of the amount of money that retirees can make, even though they're contributing to the system.
But you can easily change that by not allowing everybody to work and let them shift. They don't have to give, you can set it up where you get paid, there's no match money, it doesn't go to PIBA, you've already retired, you're getting that, and allow everybody to take the balance of their paycheck and invest it a different way. There's different ways to work around that. But what they're doing is they're eliminating our ability to keep great talent in when people aren't flourishing to run to government to get hired, especially in police, fire, and some critical points. I don't know who we need to talk to, but I think it needs to be a priority of working it. I mean, they need to give us the tools to attract and retain at this point. I mean, we got a fleet of people that are gonna be retiring over the next 5 years. That some folks may wanna stay, but there's no incentive for them to stay. They're penalized. So why wouldn't we work on that? So I think I'd like to find out who the key people that we can turn this, and we need to have one-on-one conversations with them. I think.
Well, we need to do examples, and we've talked about that. because the math, if you do the math, and I think those, when you talk to legislators, you know, you have to show them, like as y'all know, you have to give them a concrete example of people in real time and how it's working and how it affects them. So I don't think they
Show them a
really
formula.
know that exactly. I mean, we have real examples of people right here at the city, and when we've talked to Denise, our HR director, about her example for, you know, as one. It doesn't logically make sense to say that if you've got an employee who's coming back to work and maybe, and I think it's more philosophical, honestly, is what we're gonna get down to with the folks who make probably the decisions, and that just may be where it is with PIPA and otherwise, because if you logically think about it, even if you have someone who's making a certain salary, but they're also paying back into the system at that formula for that salary. So it's not breaking PIBA, but it may be a philosophical discussion about allowing people in certain capacities in their, or higher up in their career to still work. And Pam knows this system better probably than any of us, so we'll have to figure out a way to give examples that make sense. But we'll have to get y'all to help us if we go down this path with which legislators would listen.
I think showing them a formula like other people have done, where you take out, PIPA doesn't change if you're still working there and they're not contributing and you're not putting in, you're not creating anymore. I mean, that logic, I don't know who came up with the logic, but it's not correct. And so I think we gotta discuss that and get somebody who's willing to take a real live example and put it forth. But I mean, I think every city, I know that the 4 big cities are getting together to discuss some of this as well, because there's been some phone calls between the mayors to have this discussion, because this and several other issues are affecting, you know, our communities, and, you know, we need them to allow us to have the tools.
And I think what we were saying, it didn't have to be tied to COVID anymore, but by the time that we realized, you know, it was sort of added in the last minute with the proviso, there really wasn't any opportunity to correct it at that point. But I think what we were saying, just don't tie it to COVID so that we could at least have the opportunity to work on it, yeah.
Well, I think there's opportunity, we can just maybe get some meetings set up. I do like the fact that y'all did give us the scenarios, which I finally got, light bulb went off, because when you just talk about it and you don't actually see how the formula works, I would assume that, I don't know, this isn't I don't wanna say a good thing, but it's confusing, meaning let's not touch it. Most of the members, for some reason, I think had something to do with timing when they were trying to end the proviso. And the previous year, they tried to like remove the proviso, but a couple of groups got together and say, could you at least extend it to the upcoming, the following
Right.
year? And then when it was time for it to come up again, the members were like, oh, we already went over this. We gave you 1 additional year, but that's not.
And none of that example work to explain it had been done.
Correct.
Yeah.
And we found all that out within a couple of hours.
Oh, yeah, as y'all were getting all our calls flurrying around. Yeah, we have people that in real time that impacts, like right now, today. So, yeah.
Other things that were passed that affect the city: firefighter subsistence deduction from income, which is making firefighter subsistence income deductible from state income tax. And then the judicial reform bill, which is kind of impacts all governments, all citizens. But that was something that was the reform which allows the governor to appoint members to the JMSC, and other reforms of how of the service on JMSC by its members. Joint,
Bond.
no,
Judicial merit selection.
judicial merit selection.
Judicial merit.
Thank you. Affordable housing development tax exemptions. This is an issue that I don't know if we've had in the city of Columbia or not. The tax exemption for nonprofits that provide affordable housing, there's passed in 2020 has been used by some creative property owners who found loopholes to get property tax exemptions for some housing developments that were never intended to be covered under the law. The attempt to close the loophole failed at the last minute because of some back and forth between some members about some additional language that people wanted to insert in the House. But I expect this will be back again next year. We got one more? Is that the end of the show? Okay. It was a very productive year for us on the budget front in terms of securing funding. There was not a lot of legislation passed that were super impactful to the city in terms of like how it will affect next year compared to last year.
As we work towards, priorities, and some of those priorities being legislative stuff, we do have a real interest in speed and red light cameras and things like that. There are a lot of cities that people are starting to come up. We also seriously want to have some more deeper discussion, trying to work with DOT to get more funding. Out of the $6 billion that they've collected, $600 million between 46 counties doesn't really help do anything. We got 9 major entrance ways to our community, and we really want to figure out how do we, work with them closer. Penny's gonna play a big role in that in the future, but there's still, DeRay Street is still Highway 1. And Garner's Ferry is still Highway 378. When it comes to cleanup and other stuff, we wanna make sure that we're looking at that. Obviously, seeing what comes down the pipe when it comes to judicial reform, I know that's the discussion we continue to talk about, but also looking at, the future, how we continue to watch out and protect the safety measures. And I think there's a lot of things that are gonna come up that we're gonna have to, there will be some more policy pushes, not just about money, but policy pushes. I think we're gonna have to pay a little more attention this year than ever, from what I'm hearing.
One more thing that we probably should have included on here that we didn't was insurance for restaurants, liability insurance for restaurants that
There's some discussions going on now, as I said, with several of the mayors that plan on having some conversation with the legislators, because it is affecting us. And it's interesting because I've talked to a handful of legislators and I get different stories. One tells me that it's not regulated and that's part of the problem. Other people tell me there are plenty providers and that doesn't seem to be the case, but nobody can really hand me, but when you see people's numbers go 6, 7, some of them 10 plus up. Hospitality industry is our largest employer across the state. It's a key to tourism. And, I don't know, I guess they want us to go back to brown bagging. I'm not quite sure, but, I don't understand why there's this reluctancy to address the issue and look at it. The only thing I can assume is that the plaintiff's lawyers lobbying group is doing a better job than we are.
I think having coalitions of mayors, especially the mayors from the major metropolitan areas, all prioritize it with their delegations would be helpful, very helpful.
There's a lot of discussion, especially with some of the coastal and the upstate over the last couple weeks, because more and more businesses are being affected tremendously by it. Somebody goes from $4,800 a year to $48,000 a year. That's a difference if I'm gonna be in business or not.
Right.
But the lack of interest so far by the legislators to address it is a little mind-boggling to me. So, I mean, that definitely is gonna be, with that, it's gonna be a major discussion.
Any public safety efforts too, but I know we'll be talking about, finalizing more priority type discussions later, but, definitely want to make sure that stays on the radar.
Public safety concerns, yes.
Yeah, and I echo the mayor's public safety technology, the red lights and everything.
Well, I mean, and I think, I want to see the data, where does constitutional carry and where all that goes. I mean, there's still concern by folks about not doing it. I think it puts our law enforcement, and I just think we got to continue to educate, and communicate with our legislature about those type of issues. I mean, I know it's not a popular issue and people are afraid to discuss it, but the reality is, we need to make sure that our job is to protect our community. So I think we want to continue to have discussions and look at, all right, well, what's coming down the pipe? So I think looking at these pre-filed, but, also, listening to our law enforcement, this is where I think we're just going to have to continue to use pulling our regional support together in discussions.
Yes. That's, the more people you can have all pestering their legislators, the better. On the same issue, everybody singing the same song.
Well, y'all did great. Do better next year, right?
Absolutely. Raise the quota.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Do we need a formal adjourn?
Oh, that's what I needed, thank you.
That's to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion and second. Madam Clerk, could you read it?
Mr. Brennan?
Yes.
Dr. Buzzard? Yes.
Mayor Rich.
Aye.
Thank you.
For 10 minutes.